What's up guys, MrBayeasy here, and welcome to part 3 of our custom power-up topic. I really quick want to say this video might be a bit longer, which you'll already realize if you've clicked on it. I do apologize because this one has some, I think I want to go into a bit more detail on this particular part than the rest of them, because this is the theoretical, variation of our topic on this so far. So we're going to jump right into it with the very first one, and I think one of the most promising ones is a jump height alteration. So how high you can actually jump, and this is something you can customize in player traits, which of course means you can customize this with a custom power up. Now I think this has some very promising benefits. It might not seem like it right off the bat, but I'll give you some examples. One of the biggest ones that come to mind for me is Abandoned from Halo 4. If you played Halo 4, you'll know what I'm talking about, and if you played competitive on Halo 4 with Abandoned, you'll know what I'm talking about even further. So essentially on Abandoned with competitive, after a couple of tournaments, after a couple of variations of their competitive game type, they decided to add blocks on the on essentially ring 2 on both sides, so you can jump up to ring 3. Now I understand that's a little bit confusing. I'll try to find some images for you here so you can see what I'm talking about, but essentially this enabled you to get up to ring 3. Now, if this wasn't in play and we simply had a custom power-up that enabled jump height alterations, you could very easily maneuver this map in just an absolutely unbelievable way. I mean, it would be so versatile. Not necessarily as versatile as Jetpack would be, but in and of itself, it's a very promising thing to use, and there's a bunch of other maps that I can think of as well, such as Adrift that might benefit from this, being able to jump from, on the outer balcony areas, being able to jump from just the bottom balcony to the top balcony, up and down, back and forth. You can really be a nuisance to an enemy teammate, or even an enemy team, if you're able to capitalize on it enough. So it does require a certain play style, of course, if you're going to be using this. I think it's very beneficial as a supportive role, and in some situations can really give your team a slight advantage, or at least open an opportunity for you to make some serious pushes because you were able to basically push them in an unorthodox way. So essentially the same idea as Jetpack, just not as, in my opinion, Jetpack can be a tad overpowered, just a little bit, just because of how versatile it actually is. It's pretty much limitless mobility, especially if you're talking about a fairly small map and not many height variations and stuff like that. So, for example, Sanctuary. Jetpack on that map dominated because you could just be up on ring 3, down on ring 2, up on ring 3. You could be floating up. You could be running around a snipe tower and just jetpack up to the other area, and the enemy teammate would be like, well, what am I going to do? I can go around. I can go up the ramp. By the time you engage him, he's going to be full shields and ready to go again. So it's a whole nother engagement you got to go through rather than the chasing you just did. So it's a very interesting thing to think about. It's not something that's really been implemented too much in a competitive setting. We've seen it with low gravity fields and stuff like that with custom game settings in some more popular fun custom games, but never really in competitive have we really seen that all too much. So I think it would be very interesting to think of. It can also be used in an offensive way, okay? It can be used in a very positive offensive way, specifically if you're a player who uses a higher sensitivity. Now, if you're a high sensitivity player, I would say upwards of 5, probably 6 or 7 being the most beneficial and beyond. I know not many players play on that, at least competitively anyway. I'm sure a multitude of people play on higher than 6, but if you're a higher sensitivity player, you are going to benefit from this immensely from an offensive standpoint. You guys all know that jumping when you're in close range, if you're fighting against a player with a slower sensitivity, is detrimental. There's probably no way they're able to hit your head unless they're expecting you to jump, or if they have the high ground and you jump, because at that point it's essentially like you're not moving much at all, pretty much. So essentially you're still lined up. But with this, you can I'm talking about a very big increase in your jump height. So probably around 35 to 40% jump height increase, maybe even 50% jump height increase, maybe not that much, that's kind of high, but it would be very, very versatile in an offensive setting. You could jump straight up, you could jump over the player and still maintain very good accuracy if you're able to hit the shots because of the fact that your sensitivity is higher. You could jump diagonally to the right or the left, and again, they wouldn't be able to really follow you if they're, I would say, if they're playing on sensitivity lower than 5 or lower, maybe, I don't think they'd really be able to follow you, especially if you're able to pull off these maneuvers in a very fluid, and fast motion, okay? So it can be used offensively as well, but at the same time, it does have a downside, guys. If you're not going to play the role that this thing dictates, if you're not going to play to this thing's abilities and advantages, it's going to hurt you because you're going to be lingering in the air so long, you're not going to be able to be strafing, so you're more prone to being sniped in the head because you're floating past an area. So essentially, it does have disadvantages, and that's why I think this is so awesome, that it's so versatile, because it has the advantages of mobility, and not crazy mobility like jetpack. It's very strategic mobility, and it also has the advantages of offensive capabilities, but at the same time, if you're not going to use it properly, it's going to hurt you rather than help you. So now we're going to move on to the second one, which I think is also promising and has some very interesting contributions to the game. So I actually forgot to mention one thing on the jump height topic. Competitive could actually design maps that revolve around the jump height, modification. Now, power weapons and everything like that can be used on any map. You really don't need to make a map to revolve around a power weapon. It just, you can do it, but it doesn't make sense because most power weapons can be used in most situations anyway. So with this particular thing, it's very situational, and I think most maps you can still use this in a very positive way, but competitive could even develop maps that revolve around things like this, where having a jump height advantage might make a very significant difference and actually be very advantageous to a teammate or to a team that has a teammate that's able to use this and get to those areas where they cannot, or kind of like shortcuts, if you will, shortcuts on a map to a different area of that map, or maybe to a spot where I wouldn't say that's not accessible, because that's a bit unfair, but to an area that's difficult to access or longer to access through a longer route than it would be if you were able to have this jump height ability to get there. Okay, so it's a slightly different way to utilize this. I don't think too overpowered, definitely not too overpowered, because if you use it the wrong way, you could be in some really big trouble. So we're going to move on to the next topic, ammo regeneration. And before you guys freak out, I'm not talking about instantaneous weapon regeneration. You have full ammo and everything like that. I'm talking about a very slow regeneration of ammo over the course of 30 to 40 seconds, where let's just use the sniper as an example. Over the course of that period of time, you maybe regenerate 1 clip of ammo, maybe 5 rounds of ammo, which is 1 clip and 1 bullet. Or maybe with rockets, maybe you regenerate a round, maybe 2 rounds with a rocket over the course of 30 or 40 seconds. So it's a subtle change, guys. But at the same time, and I'll give you some examples of where this could be used in a second, but at the same time, we've seen games in the past that have been won by bullets, okay? I don't mean just bullets in general, because that's obvious. I'm talking about by single bullets, by single sniper shots, by single rocket shots, by just incredible plays that disorient the enemy, or maybe it's just a very close game and you're able to pick off that player with 1 bullet. 1 bullet decides the game. We've seen this in the past with social, competitive. I mean, it's all over the place. So it's a very interesting topic. Now, one of the ways I think this could be used is if, and in my opinion, I don't necessarily think that power weapons are too frequent on a map. I think that they could stand to be less likely on a map, less common on a map. So maybe instead of 2 or 3 minutes for rockets, 2 minutes for sniper, 3 minutes for rockets, maybe instead 3.5 minutes for sniper and 4.5 minutes for rockets. So they're less common on the map. They don't pop up as often, right? There's more time in between them. And I think this particular ability is where this would play a very big role. If you place this particular custom power-up ability in between those time limits, like let's say for a sniper, 3 minutes and 15 seconds, for rockets, 2 minutes and 15 seconds, because that is exactly the halfway point for both of these times, if we're assuming the times are changed at all. They don't have to be, but I'm just saying it would be interesting to see players not heavily rely on power weapons as much, because I know that it can be pretty easy, even though 2 minutes and 3 minutes is kind of long in game. It can be pretty easy to say, okay, well, oh shit, they got our sniper, or they got the rockets, let's just lay low for a bit, let's wait for the next round, especially if you're ahead in the game, right? Let's just wait for a little bit, let's wait for the next round of power weapons, we'll set up and see what happens then, okay? So instead of that, this particular case, you might want to watch out for that enemy team going after ammo regeneration, or you might want to actually go after ammo regeneration, because it might give you a small window to push, maybe not the biggest window, maybe not a full power weapon, but essentially, again, it'll give you a slight window to push. So instead of having, bam, you have a bunch of power weapons on the map again, everyone's scattering for them, and you have the power weapons, and then you actually go for these pushes, you now have a situation where power weapons are very advantageous because they're more advantageous than they were before because they're not as common. So you're going to want to maintain your usage of that. You might not want to be as reckless, okay, with your power weapon, which I know some people can be because they know, okay, well, if I lose this on the push, worst case scenario, I toss it off the map where the enemy team gets it. But it's okay because we just have to lay low, not give them the opportunity to get picks and all that stuff. Wait for the next round of power weapons, and then push again, right? Especially if you're ahead, that's a very common mindset to have. So it would be interesting to see if you have these power weapons and they're being traded back and forth between the enemy team and your team because of the fact that they're not being, they're not cycling all the time. To have this thing pop up every once in a while and see who gets it, and maybe even prolong their push or prolong their dominance of that particular part of the map, or whatever it may be, their momentum, right? Whatever it could be. This particular one, I will admit, is not as competitively sound. It doesn't have the strongest argument against being applied to a competitive match or competitive settings, at least as much as jump height. I think jump height definitely has a much stronger argument, and it's much more promising than ammo regeneration. But at the same time, I don't think this can be discounted. I think that it's something that is useful if you're going to really be conservative with your ammo. I think it would change the play style of a lot of players. It might make it so that, if you lose enough players, because I know sometimes, guys, you could be down 2 players and 2 other players will still make a push. They'll still make a push because they have power weapons. They're confident. Nothing wrong with that. But it might make a slight bit of change in their mental thought. Instead of pushing, okay, well, whatever, we're gonna have power weapons soon anyway, right? Instead of thinking like that, well, hey, we might lose these power weapons and we're not going to have them for X amount of time. We might want to say, okay, well, let's just back away from this push, regroup, set up for this ammo regeneration, and then see what happens once we start regenerating ammo and stuff like that. Because again, it's not an instantaneous regeneration. So, like I said, I even know that this particular one doesn't have as strong of a competitive implementation as jump height alteration, but doesn't mean that it's not worth including in this particular commentary. Now, the honorable mention that I spoke of in the beginning is, and this one might have been better. I'm not really sure. You'd have to tell me in the comments down below. But essentially, a quote-unquote rapid fire ability where you shoot maybe 35% faster. And then I thought to myself, well, would this really be beneficial? Because then again, we could just use damage boost. Like, what's the point? We could just use damage boost. And then I thought to myself, well, damage boost, you have the luxury of possibly missing a little bit because you're going to be doing more damage anyway. Whereas in a rapid fire ability, this is going to benefit to great lengths a person who is extremely consistent in their shot, who doesn't miss 4 shots all day, every day, okay? That's the player that it's going to really benefit. So in a way, it has a slightly better implementation than damage boost because it really relies heavily on your skill as a player to hit your shots. Damage boost, okay, we know, guys, in a burst of a battle rifle, there's 3 bullets. When you have damage boost, you might be able to miss 1 or 2 bullets and still receive even regular damage because you have damage boost. So that's the dilemma that I had in my mind is it really necessary? And is it as good of an implementation as ammo regeneration? And I think it's probably equal because it definitely highly depends very, very strongly in this case on the skill of the player that's able to pick it up, and it would need to be a very consistent player. So let me know what you think down below of all these ideas. I'd be very interested to hear your comments and ideas on my ideas on the topics that I covered today. And even if you have even further ideas for player trait alterations within a custom power-up, I might even make a part 4 that goes even in further detail, or not maybe in further detail, but brings up even more traits that could be altered that have promising implementations for competitive. And again, guys, I'm not saying this because I'm a competitive player or that I like competitive. That's no secret. I love both, okay? I like playing competitive and I like playing casually, but the fact of the matter is, if it works well competitively, it's going to work well anywhere. Because competitive, it's the most strict, right? Social games, it's more laxed. Custom games, it's like, who gives a fuck? You do whatever you want in custom games. But in competitive, it is very strict. It is very, precise. You need to think of things. And that's why I really thought, would jump height alteration be stupid? Would it be a bad implementation? Would it be too overpowered? And when I really thought about it, I was like, no, actually, it's very evened out. You have just enough advantages to outweigh the disadvantages, and the advantages aren't so crazy that they're overpowered. right? It's just like, you know, Jetpack, but with less advantages, less maneuverability, more tactics, more strategy that needs to be applied to your gameplay. So that's why I chose that one. That's why I think that one has a very strong implementation, and you know, that's kind of the whole idea that I'm thinking about. So if you have any trait alterations, drop them down in the comments. I'd be very interested to hear them, and I might even make another video with your permission, using your ideas to promote them. Of course, I'll give you credit for your ideas, since there's no quarrel there with any of that. So with that being said, guys, rate the video what you think it deserved, and if you'd like to become a Sage in training, make sure you subscribe today. This has been MrBayeasy, your favorite Sage, and as always, I'll see you in the next video.